So here's a potent question for a mobile Me&You conference, right? Does technology make our lives better or worse? Okay, show of hands to the multitudes. Does it make, okay, better or worse? You have to decide. You can't, there's no middle ground. That's not acceptable. It's not a choice. This is a forced choice exercise. Does technology make our lives better? Does it make our lives worse? All right, we got some, thank you. Oh, I see, we voted twice. I got into this research, so my first probably kind of academic study, I transitioned from kind of working in industry in digital marketing communications to academia. And in one of my first studies, I was talking about how voice assistants, like Alexa, right, could be used in a marketing and advertising context, and what it means to marketers and advertisers to use this voice technology, right? And the guy I was talking to started talking about this promise of a smart home, right, which we've been hearing about, you all have been hearing about all of your lives, but for decades, ever since the Jetsons, like, we've got this smart home and we'll be able to live like happier, more fulfilled, maybe more productive lives, we'll have to do less and we'll have more time for leisure. But this question of does technology actually make our lives better? Do things like voice assistants actually make our lives better? Just really resonated with me. And as an academic, that's something I wanted to dig into more and focus on is how can voice technology, how can voice assistants in particular improve our lives? So can these influence this? Affordances of voice assistants, right? Why do we use voice technology in the first place? It's super convenient. I do a lot of this, I'm realizing I've got some soft knees today. So it's super convenient, right? It's super accessible. We don't have to learn any kind of particular program or anything like that. It's super personalizable, the AI-driven applications are. And as I started to think about this more, I realized that accessibility, that ease of use, that convenience can be particularly helpful with older adults. And the personness, right? The idea that you're kind of talking to something with a social presence, like a being of sorts. Maybe that's helpful with older adults living alone who may have mobility issues, who may have accessibility to technology issues, and may be missing a companion or someone to talk to. So this is a big deal, right? When we think of loneliness, when I first started thinking about it, it's a bummer, right? Nobody likes to be lonely. Do you like to be lonely? Raise your hand if you like to be lonely. I don't know, right? Okay, we all agree. I don't like to be lonely. That doesn't mean that we're not, that we're uncomfortable being alone, but being lonely is about a difference between where you want to be in terms of kind of social connection and where you actually are. Loneliness is a bummer, but it's also a big public health issue. So it's connected with self-neglecting behavior, with depression, with anxiety. It's been linked with cognitive decline. It's been linked with potentially being able to predict death even. One study says it's as bad for your health as 15 cigarettes a day. So it is a potent public health issue. It's not just a bummer. And it's an epidemic. Vivek Murthy, the U.S. Surgeon General who wasn't and then he was again, right, wrote this book called Together, where even before the pandemic, he was talking about this epidemic of loneliness. And this is not unique to the United States. It is something that's being talked about around the world, and the pandemic certainly brought that into sharp and painful focus, particularly with those who couldn't leave, right, who were living alone, maybe in an assisted living facility, most of which were really absolutely locked down. So can something like voice assistants actually help address this potent public health issue? I don't always make fun of Alexa, but when I do, it's usually because she said something stupid. Right? This is not like a panacea. Like, there's a lot of uses of Alexa where you're like, this is dumb. How could this possibly matter? Right? How could this possibly make a difference? It doesn't understand me. All it does is tell me, scores for things or the weather in the Midwest. That's really what we're most interested in, is constant weather news. But it can connect you with a lot and with a lot of experiences. So I wanted to see if it mattered. So yeah, I'm Valerie Jones. This is what I study. I worked in advertising agencies before this, so in media in particular. So how do we connect with people? How do brands connect, particularly through new and emerging technologies? And I worked in Chicago and I worked in San Francisco, but I grew up in Nebraska, and so I came back here and worked here and had a digital marketing firm of my own, and then conned the college into giving me a job. That's usually how it works, right? It was a big con, but it's worked out so far. And I got interested in studying these voice assistants because it was a new thing, because it was an emerging form of media, and that's what I spent most of my career studying and figuring out how to use. All right, so this is supposed to be kind of about voice technology more broadly, so here's my nod to that. If we're talking about voice tech more broadly, it encompasses more than just voice assistants, more than just Alexa and the Google Assistant, right? The voice or speech recognition kind of tech market is giant. It's supposed to reach nearly $60 billion in the US by 2030. That's not just smart speaker stuff. That is voice recognition technology being used generally to kind of ease some sort of process, right? So in cars, obviously, we're seeing lots of that. In banking, in healthcare, in insurance, right? So when you call and it's super annoying because you get not a person, but you're taken through kind of a series of answer this, answer this, answer this. But that's voice technology, and it's about convenience and access and trying to provide some sort of information in an easier way. What I'm talking about is a subset of that. I'm particularly interested in the fact that about 42% of the US population currently uses a voice assistant, whether it's Siri or Alexa or the Google Assistant or one of the others that are smaller. So this is a thing, this is a big thing. This is my chart to show you that it's a big thing. It's not a chart. This is my slide to show you that it's a thing. And we know that voice technology influences loneliness. So if we think, can we call the radio voice technology? Do we think that's fair? I'm going to. Good, because I'm going to, and I did right here. So even going back to the radio, right? So this is a picture of a statue in front of a radio station in the middle of Nebraska that I have a particular affinity to because my grandfather helped start it, called KRVN. And they're huddled around the radio to hear the latest news, right? The latest weather, maybe to hear whatever kind of radio drama was on at that time. But it's helped us feel less alone. It's helped us connect for a really, really long time. So we've got that. That's the thing. We've got loneliness as a public health issue. We've got a lot of people using voice assistants. And then we have a really growing population of Americans 65 and older. Right? Not just here, but worldwide, like a large population of older adults who increasingly want to live alone, or maybe are living alone in an independent or assisted living facility. But this is a group of folks that we need to figure out how to meet their needs, right? And how to make sure that people are taken care of through their full stages of life. There's been plenty of research to show that ICT, or interactive communication technologies, if you want to be academic about it, and I guess I do because this is my job, ICT can help reduce loneliness and create social connection. So whether we're talking about studies about email from decades ago, whether we're talking about studies about VR, we know that it can help potentially reduce loneliness and create social connection. So I've done a couple studies on this stuff, and I'm just summarizing the findings because I don't want to bog you all down too much at 2:10 on a beautiful Friday afternoon when you're so generous to be here as to sacrifice the sunshine and listen to stuff about voice assistants. So key findings to date. Spoiler alert, it's not a spoiler because this is the part where I tell you about the fact that yes, we have found that Alexa can influence loneliness among aging adults living alone. So this was, we started it right before the pandemic. So we started it in 2019. We recruited older adults living alone in independent living facility. So they were not just 65 plus, but it was, I think the youngest was 75. So 75 to 92-year-olds who we recruited, and we gave them a voice assistant, we gave them an Echo Dot, and we trained them on how to use it. And we gave them an 11 by 17 sheet of paper, two-sided, of a bunch of different things you could do with it. And we said, hey, here's how you use it. Do 5 things a day. Any of the 5 things that sound interesting to you. And we'll see what happens. We'll give it a go. We gave them a pre and post study. So for 4 weeks, they used a voice assistant 5 times a day, doing whatever, using any of the commands that we provided. For the next 4 weeks, we said, use it or don't use it. It doesn't matter to us. We wanted to see if they would keep using it, even if they didn't have to, right? We did give them some money. This was grant funded to do this stuff. And then we measured again at the end and found that loneliness was significantly reduced, particularly among those who treated it in an anthropomorphic way. So when they said, good morning, Alexa, and good night, Alexa, and hey, Alexa, you're in charge of the cats now, I'm leaving. Real quote, true story, warms my darn heart. You're in charge of the cats now, I'm leaving. So that's a pretty good example of how you're treating it like a person, which is kind of what we thought would happen. And the more they treated it kind of like a person in that anthropomorphic way, that was connected to and actually predicted the reduction in loneliness. We also know that it provides kind of convenience, a sense of companionship and security, so we interviewed people before and afterwards too. Immediacy and accessibility and nostalgia. So I was just talking with Christopher over there about this thing called the nostalgia effect. What do you think the most common use was of Alexa? This is an open-ended question. I am looking for the class. Weather. Second most common. Question of the day. Good one. No, but good. I like it. I like your spirit. Music. That's one of my students too. Music. Yeah. So just like, what do you all use yours for? Like probably music, and then shortly followed by weather. Yeah. Yeah. Lights. And that we actually did in the study we're doing now. We had a woman who went rogue and had her nephew hook it up to lights, which is super useful. But we're like, that's not part of our study. Please don't do that. But music was a big thing, and a lot of the music was about connecting to this earlier time. So connecting to a time when they were really happy. Yeah, or connecting to music that their spouse loved, and this was only focused on older adults living alone, and so most of them had been married and had lost their spouses. But that was a really interesting piece of this too. So coming up, we have 2 studies going on right now, which is super fun. It is fun. One of them is about tailoring. So it was, again, focused on older adults, and it was about tailored routines and personalization. So if we have one group of older adults who has a standard routine, and we ask you to do these 5 things in the morning and these 5 things in the evening, but we're not giving you a lot of choice about it. And those 5 things are based on literature that suggests that they may be connected to loneliness, and pain reduction is a piece that we're looking at in this one as well. With those who are able to personalize their routines, would that have greater influence over their perceptions of loneliness and their perceptions of pain? Don't know yet. I'll let you know in the fall, maybe summer, maybe fall. And then the second one that we're working on right now is about modality. So this is, we give one group voice assistants that's audio only. one that has a screen, and then there's a control group. And we want to see, and this was particularly focused on those who may have mild cognitive impairment. So it's not a requirement, but we're interested in those who may have differences in cognition if one type of voice assistant, if a screen is more or less influential on loneliness and social isolation than audio. What do you think would be particularly useful about being able, about a voice assistant with a screen in terms of being able to connect with other people? Yeah.
Helping those that are hard of hearing.
Yes. So you can see, so when they listen to music, they can actually like see the words and things, and they can see a lot of like text, and you know, if you're looking for recipes or something like that, you can actually see the text. Yeah. Anything else? What could you use it to do?
Photos.
To help photos. So you can see how the last person that I onboarded, he was just amazed by the photos. He lived in the tiniest apartment I'd seen so far. He didn't have any kids and he'd never been married. And when I set him up with the Echo Show, you get to choose kind of what your screen looks like. This is just to begin with, right? And he chose the nature photos, and he just kept looking over the nature photos, and he's like, oh, that's really beautiful. Oh, that's a good one. So he didn't have any of his own photos in there yet, but even just having something in his apartment with a screen with some rotating cool pictures, you know, was cool to him. Video calling. So in this study, part of the intervention was having them call. So if you had an audio assistant, you have to make one call through the voice assistant a week, and same if you had a video assistant. So it took about 3 hours per person we onboarded to get them all set up with how to use the Echo Show and get them connected with someone to call. So they had to pick one person kind of in their lives that they thought they'd be able to video call with. We had to make sure they had the app themselves so that they could video call them through the app, and they'd be able to connect at least once a week. This was a painful process. But in that same session, the man I was working with identified his niece as someone to call. And so we kind of put her number in there, and we called her. And we're calling them out of the blue as well. And so this really speaks to, I think, some Nebraska trust, that we're calling these people out of the blue. And it's like, hey, I'm a researcher at the University of Nebraska, and I'm here with your like 89-year-old mom, giving her a piece of technology. Are we cool with this? And they are, actually. But so with that call, he's calling his niece. She actually has the app, so she's actually able to answer on her phone. She gets a surprise call from her uncle. And she's out at harvesting. And so it's this beautiful fall day, and golden fields and blue sky. And it's like her voice lights up, or her face lights up to see her uncle. And her uncle's face just lit up because he got to see her, and he hadn't seen her in a while. And she's showing him, like giving him a tour of the cab, you know. She's like, here's my makeup, and here's my snack drawer, and here's the place where I store the vodka when we're doing like our last run of the day. No joke, I love that. And it was really cool to see that connection happen. And that matters, right? So we'll see if there's a connection with cognition and efficacy. In terms of its influence on loneliness and social isolation as well. Personality is something that we're super interested in. So in both of those studies, we gave them the big 5, like personality inventory, because we want to figure out, this isn't right for everybody. Like not every person, not every older person, not every human is going to be like, yes, Alexa is great, and I use it all the time and it totally fits into my life. That's not the case at all. So we want to see what types of people it might be useful for, right? And you can imagine that application, how useful it might be in a home instead type of situation, where they are a home care agency and they visit your apartment however often they're supposed to. But if you knew when they kind of signed up for your service that they were the type of person who might benefit from or be able to use a voice assistant with a screen, like an Echo Show, Maybe that's an offering that one of the check-ins is virtual and one of the check-ins is face-to-face. And maybe that option, is less expensive for that person. And maybe it's just as useful to have that connection, because sometimes with a care service like that, some of it is about just seeing another person, right? And connecting with another person. I'll talk more about social connectedness and co-created guides here. I do love this tweet. I keep saying Alexa when I mean to say Siri, and I just can't believe I live in a time where I'm getting my servant robot names mixed up. And I've done that many times, by the way. Yes, I'm seeing shaking heads, so it's not just me. So this is another thing that's coming up. I think Australians actually don't like it when the one image you choose of Australia is a kangaroo. I think they feel it's sort of like reductive, like we're more than kangaroos, which I believe, I'm sure, I know they are, but it's a thing, it is a thing. So I have a Fulbright coming up in the spring to go to Australia and build on this research. So I'm interested in how it can influence social connectedness. So kind of how close we are with people. If we can use it to more kind of proactively create these social connections, either face-to-face or digitally. So can we use voice assistants in such a way to train people, to remind them about their coffee over here, this event that Lincoln is having over here, this like church gathering or whatever over here. So use it to facilitate face-to-face interaction, right? And or use it to facilitate like digital interaction, whether you're calling someone or whether you're playing a game through the device with someone, where you live or on the other side of the world. Something that I thought I was missing in earlier studies was really the voice of the audience, which is kind of terrible because I'm like, as an ad PR person, you should be all about, or a journalist, right? All about understanding the audience and the voice of the audience. But I haven't sat down with older adults to kind of co-create an intervention, right? Like, what's useful for you? Like, how would this be helpful in your life? How are you using it now? And so I'm focusing on those who currently use voice assistants to understand usage, to understand what's useful, what's not, what they wish they could see, what would be helpful to them, to work with them to co-create a guide to social connection. So here's how we might proactively use voice assistants to facilitate, again, not just digital, but also face-to-face social connection. And test it out with a group before I go, kind of train them on how to use it, have them use it, and then interview them again when I'm back in the States, actually. And with all of these studies, for better or worse, we collect all of their interaction data. So that's another beautiful thing, right? For us as researchers anyway, not for the students who code this. Actually, I coded some of it last time. Is we can actually see, so it's not just self-reported, like, yes, I interacted 5 times a day. Like, all of us want to pretend that we, like, adhered to the assignment, right? Not all of us do. Yes, I'll send my slides for this presentation the day before. I sent them an hour before, okay? That's my actual behavior. So we have the actual behaviors of everyone as well, so we can see how those relate to the variables that we're interested in. So we'll be able to see at the end of the study what they actually did, what they did most often in this kind of guide to social connection, and what maybe is most useful in terms of affecting their, or influencing their loneliness and connection. So what? Great question, Valerie. Oh, the top is cut off. That's okay. It is there too. That's okay. So in terms of, kind of core competencies of a smart speaker, that can seem kind of silly, but what we've seen is that if you show people how to use it in ways that can be useful, it gets used more, right? Like anything else. So the fact that it's highly customizable, one of my former students is working at an agency, really a voice-first, a voice-only agency, and they're working with a client in the construction business to create a bespoke smart speaker for construction sites, so that they would have it outside at the site, and they would just be able to, if they need to order more of this, or talk to this person about that, or remember to, I don't know, I'm not intimately familiar with the construction business, so I'm not exactly sure what they need. But ordering more stuff and talking to people about problems are two of the things that they're focused on in terms of making this bespoke smart speaker. What would be an issue on a construction site that they're going to have to work through for this to work? Noise. Yeah, it's super noisy. So they are building the AI. They are figuring out how to deal with the noise. They are figuring out what this thing looks like, because it obviously needs to be super portable and super mobile. Look at me, Gary. I'm pulling this back in order for it to be useful. So that's the place that this is going, right? Is with bespoke smart speakers. Kind of tailored to industry and solving problems in different industries. Proactive, personalized health. So it's super customizable. We love that. That's very useful. And that's great. If you have one, you're probably starting to notice a few more like nudges, like, would you also like to do this? And usually I'm like, no, I would not. But imagine if it could be nudging you about things that were customized to you and tailored to improving your health, right? So whether it's, you can do reminders from medicine, right? You can do that all day. That works well. But even things like, going on walks or, calling your neighbor or a friend or a family member, or, listening to relaxing music or meditating or all sorts of things where it's customized to you and your preferences and your needs and your health issues. And it's not waiting for you to engage with it, but it's there and it's engaging with you at a time that you might need it most. So like super simple application. Sometimes we can kind of predict maybe when we're going to be most lonely, right? Maybe it's a certain time of day. Maybe it's a certain situation. If you can predict when you might be most lonely, like if it's Saturday night, it's because you used to go dancing, right, with your spouse. Then it can give you a nudge on a Saturday night to call someone, to do something, to listen to a type of music that's uplifting to you. That can make a difference. Tailored media for loneliness and social connection. I've been thinking more and more about, again, how we can be more proactive and how we can influence these things, how we can influence social connection. Can we craft stories that are told through things like smart speakers, right, that are meant to create a sense of social connection, that are meant to influence loneliness by design? Can we craft games that are meant to influence loneliness and social connection? I'm thinking particularly of facilitating that connection inside a facility as well, so inside like an independent or assisted living facility. There was a woman that I was working with over the summer. You hear a lot of stories, which is great. And she just moved to this independent assisted living facility. And she was 85, and she had just, I have a hard time talking about these things. She'd lost her spouse, and she'd lost her son. And she had one son left, and so she moved here because this is where he lived, right? So that makes sense. You move to where your remaining family is. But she didn't know anybody, and she didn't want to leave Arizona. But her family, her son thought this made sense, and she decided it must. So everyone in that, it's like freshman year, right? You're moving into the dorm for the first time, and you don't know anybody, and making friends can be hard. So how do you facilitate opportunities to make friends digitally within a facility, for example? Like, could you play Jeopardy with only people in your facility, and then later on, like, meet for coffee or something like that? Like, is there a social hour that's digital or virtual that you could connect with? Because maybe you don't feel like, putting on lipstick and a dress, not that you have to, or like doing your hair to go to like margarita happy hour at your facility, which, by the way, so much programming. I was very jealous of many of these people's social lives, like much more active than me. But that could help solve a problem. That could be an opportunity to facilitate these social connections. Particularly when you think about like mobility or accessibility issues. One of the women that we worked with we gave him a brief pain inventory, and she was like an 8 on average, 8 of 10 in terms of levels of pain. That's a lot. That's a lot. And she spent most of her time in her recliner, in her small room. We saw it all. We saw like palatial apartments, and we saw very small rooms where people spent most of their time. And she was in pain pretty much all the time. She couldn't move very well. When she did, she had a walker. She was on oxygen, so that makes moving hard as well. She used to paint, and she used to crochet, and she used to read a lot, but she has macular degeneration, so she also can't see very well and can't really do any of those things anymore. So she's like, I just sit in my recliner and I play like games on my computer all day. And people come in and, to give me my medicine or whatever, but they pay more attention to my pet bird than they do to me, and my family has written me off. Her words. Can you imagine what media that is specifically tailored to create social connection inside that facility or outside of it, could maybe do? All right, so I'm gonna wrap up with the story. This is a picture of a phone that's a landline. I don't know if you guys have seen these before. Those are my 2 students over there. So I get a call in my office on my landline in my office. So first of all, I'm like, what is that noise? Secondly, it was a Friday afternoon. I'm like, who's calling me? This seems inappropriate. But I answer it. So pin a rose on my nose. I answered the phone in my office on a Friday afternoon. Pin a rose on my nose. Yep. And it was the daughter of one of the participants in my first study, calling to see if we needed the voice assistant back. And she wanted to tell me that her mother had just passed away, and she wanted to know if she needed to give this back. She found my name and number on the instruction sheet. And I said, I was so sorry to hear that her mother had passed. She was one of my favorites because she was an amazing, amazing human. And she didn't need to give it back. She could keep it or pass it on or put it down the garbage disposal, like whatever she wanted to do. And so that was, we got that out of the way. And then she said, my mom really liked using it. She's like, it really was a companion to her. She said good morning to it every morning and good night to it every night. And we would talk about it on the phone, about the goofy, stupid things it did or what she did with it. Her daughter lived out of town. And she said it really was a companion, and I wished that the facility, I asked them if they could put them in everyone's rooms, and they couldn't, and I understand that, but I just, that was a good project. That was a good thing for my mom. I'm not saying that that's right for everyone, right? That I've just solved the world's problems because there's this one person who really liked my study. I do appreciate that, though. But the end of one matters, right? So hopefully we can get more and more and more and help influence social connectedness and loneliness, not just for aging adults, because certainly not all aging adults are lonely, but for all sorts of people who need a little more connection in their lives. So thank you very much, and hit me with some questions.
Thank you so much. This is amazing. One of the things that I've known just from personal experience with my grandfather who went through Alzheimer's, it's like when somebody starts to go mentally, there's still sounds and music that seem to light up a different part of the brain. Does that connect at all, like the actual chemistry of the brain to like some of that connection with sound, have you found?
That's a great question, and I don't know, but anecdotally, we've seen that. We focused on, in the first study, actually in all of them, we've just focused on people living alone. But in the first study, there was one guy there in particular who was really upset about the fact that he couldn't be in the study because he still lived with his spouse. But his wife had Alzheimer's. And it was really bad. And she would just kind of sit in a chair like all day and like watch TV. And he was, her only caretaker. And he was lobbying us because he wanted this device for her so that she could listen to music, basically. So for exactly that reason. And so we changed the IRB requirements, and we're like, okay, we could be interested in couples too. And it started enrolling people who were couples as well. But he said that she would ask it for country western music and listen to it for hours, and it would end up being some of the same songs kind of every day. But she didn't mind because she didn't necessarily remember. And it did. He thought it was more soothing to her than watching the TV. And he'd seen that. One of the reasons he wanted to do it was they had someone come like once a week to clean. And when his wife would talk to her, she would always ask her for music, and so she'd play music for her on her phone. So the fact that she could ask it for specific things or a specific genre of music kind of mattered. But I'm really interested in that and just getting into the kind of brain chemistry of some of this, and I don't know the answer, but good question. Thank you.
Valerie, what do you think might be the next power application with voice assistance? Is it AI? Is it something else?
Yeah. I had a woman at one of the places, because I was talking about, I go back and forth with my terminology about it. Sometimes I call it AI assistant, sometimes I say voice assistant, sometimes I say intelligent agent. But this woman who's like, it's not AI, it's not sentient yet, so it is not yet AI. And I'm like, oh, okay, fair. What is the next application? I think that, so in this context anyway, I do think that it's the proactive nature of it, right? And the ecosystem, so if it's connected, like you can imagine, for an older person, kind of a smart apartment where it's connected with sensors and it's connected with appliances. There was a woman with macular degeneration who was, she moved into this facility early before she needed to with her vision because she needed to get to know the space before her vision went. And she was talking about different kind of hacks for and different kind of tools that exist for pouring yourself a glass of water, pouring yourself a glass of milk. I think there's a device that you can put in the glass first that'll tell you when you're getting to the top in case you can't see anymore. But I think being connected to an ecosystem like that, kind of a pro-health, pro-social ecosystem like that, would be smart anyway, and clearly, I didn't talk about privacy issues or ethical issues. I'm not a shill for Amazon, although I'm not maybe opposed. I'm kidding. Am I? But the fact that it's pushing commercials all the time, kind of pushing products all the time, this isn't made for older people necessarily. So there are, and Amazon has the data, but that's a bargain that we make, right? Do the benefits outweigh the costs? And I think for a lot of people in a lot of contexts, they do.
Dan, can I follow up real quick? I don't know enough about this to know if my question makes any sense now. This one, can it be programmed in such a way to remind somebody that this morning you need to take your pill with milk, remember? And then, this afternoon, no, it's this one, the blue one, the red one, and the pink one. In other words, specific instructions to that person, not something that Amazon can go out and find on the web and give back to you, but stored specific instructions programmed at a right time for that person. Give yourself your insulin now.
Yeah. You could do that now, and actually, that leads me to, that's a good point, because that leads me to it being connected with health more, right, and with your health provider. I have back issues. Who doesn't, right? But if I keep, and so with anyone who's done physical therapy type stuff before, right? Sometimes you do it, and sometimes you don't. You try to be good, and when your physical therapist asks you about it, you probably say that you were great. But that, I'm just so surprised that we're not seeing more of that right now, of just did you do the stuff you were supposed to do? Or reminders, right? Hey, remember you're supposed to do these things, take these pills, and then like, did you do them? Did you take them? And then a self-report of like, how did you feel? Like, what was most useful? And that's immensely complicated, I know, and with private information and things like that. But I mean, it could be really useful.
Well, it's kind of a good prompt because I was wondering, I'm sure you're familiar with the Alexa Developer Console, right? And so you name Alexa skills, they keep wanting to make us say skills. I just like to say voice apps.
There you go. Yep.
But I mean, and I've noticed it's gotten more and more customizable. So one thing you can do is they have a template of a spreadsheet with just certain facts. Like nothing would stop someone who's a stud, like maybe it's one of the kids fills out the spreadsheet, uploads it to that parent's skill set. So I was wondering, like, did you incorporate any like customized skills into these studies? If not, are you thinking of it? Because I think it's getting easier.
Yeah, we haven't, and yes, we are, because that is the thing, right? That is the like that's the whole promise of it. Is it's maybe promise and peril. Is its customizability in some ways, right? But I want to do that next. This one that's wrapping up, hopefully will about personalization. Hopefully will provide some more kind of evidence for like, yes, personalization matters, right? And yeah, let's do that next. Other questions? All right. It is hard though, because it's like by the time it's just changing constantly, and we've had issues in the middle of a study where it's like, this doesn't work anymore. Like, okay, well, then we will pivot and we'll figure it out. But that's on my list. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Appreciate it.
Cool.